Hey, so I just did a kick-ass intro, but it wasn't recording. So we're going to try it again. Welcome, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever it is that you are. This is Rush to Judgment with Jessica, and I'm Jessica. So, y'all, we are on day 10. This is it. This is the final. This is for all the marbles. This is what's up. This is what we've been waiting for. This is all of it. This is going to be the closing arguments from both sides. This is going to be jury instructions. This is going to be the verdict. This is it. This is done. We're done with this one. I got a couple more things lined up that I'm going to work on. They're a little bit more current, so they're not going to be popped out quite as much as this. So because they're still ongoing, but and I don't know. I might think of some other things to do. I don't know. I'm still working on it. But yeah, so this is what it is, and this is fun. So just to recap, if you've been following along, good on you. If you haven't been following along, shame on you. Either way, like, subscribe, comment, share. Even if you don't like it, even if you don't care for it, like and subscribe anyway. Somebody else might like it. It did put it out in the universe, and somebody else might come across it and say, hey, this chick's cool. Or they might say this chick is crazy. Whatever. I'm cool with whatever. Makes me no difference. I would prefer you think I was cool, but, I'm okay with people thinking I'm crazy too. They're not wrong. But anyway, so also, again, I am not a lawyer. I like to review trials and things because they're interesting to me right now. They're interesting, they're entertaining, they open up my brain to some things that I'm not all that familiar with, but that's why I like to learn. And sometimes I like to think I'm smarter than, your average bear. So sometimes I like to think I'm smarter than the lawyers. I'm not. Maybe some of them, I don't know. But just because they have a law degree doesn't mean they're so smart. But who knows? I definitely think I'm smarter than this defense lawyer lady. I don't understand either one of them. And I think they're dumb. Just my opinion. Okay. But with all that being said, these are just my opinions, just my thoughts, just my judgments, just my criticism, just my own things. Like it, don't like it, cool, whatever. It is what it is. But anyway, like, subscribe, comment, share, do all of the things. Let's get into day 10. We start out with jury instructions. And even though I sat here and did a whole intro talking to my damn self, I didn't have it ready. Oh, bam. There we go. There we go. There we go. There we go. Oh, shit, boss. That's not right. That's not right. There we go, there we go, there we go, there we go. Make sure we are turned on. And we can press play. Here we go. Super nice judge, man. Sorry if you hear coughing in the background. My daughter is in the bed sleeping.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'll inquire of you whether anyone was exposed to any discussions about the case or engaged in discussions yourself with anyone in yourselves about the case, or did any research, looked up any information, or sought or was exposed to any media reporting about the case. I see no hands. Thank you so much. As a keeping matter, we have an exhibit numbered 1000. There have been stipulations about facts, which I've read to you during the course of the trial. And these have been reduced to writing and have been marked as an exhibit so that they're formally within the record in written form. And the state and the defense agreed that I should mark this as an exhibit and be received.
On the record, Your Honor?
And Attorney Doral?
Yes.
It is received. Attorney Brown, does the state wish to call a witness at this time?
No, at this time the state rests its case.
Thank you. Attorney Doral, is the defense presenting testimony at this time?
The defense rests as well.
Then, ladies and gentlemen, the evidentiary
They didn't even
portion
put
of the
on a
trial is
defense.
closed, and so should your notebooks.
Like they just sat there and they
if you
just
can
did nothing.
Close those up and set them on the floor.
That was their
Once we have
defense.
finished here in this
We'll
room,
talk a little
those of
bit.
you who
We'll
are not
object a
in
little
the end
bit,
chosen as
and that's
alternates
it.
can pick up the notebooks and take them with you to the deliberation room.
I
Those
don't
of you
understand.
who are
I
chosen
don't know
as
what the point of
alternates
this
when we go
was.
through that process can
Like,
leave
why
them on the
didn't you
floor,
just
and those will be collected and destroyed.
Take a plea.
I'm going to start the process of closing out here in the courtroom by reading to you the final jury instructions. There's a number of pages, and some of this is familiar to you because I know you paid attention
yeah, I
when I read the
forgot to-
preliminary jury instructions, and there
in
is
the-
a degree of repetition. I will advise
My
you that
intro.
in
It was in the
preliminarily
first one that
instructing
nobody
you,
saw.
I did combine the counts, so that instead
Recap
of reading instructions for
of
8
what he was
counts,
charged
I read
with.
4 with references to this 2 separate counts.
Not in the one
I
anybody
can't do that
saw.
at this point. I need to instruct you on each
But
and every
he's gonna
count,
tell you, so
that
that's
part of these
fine.
instructions is essentially doubled. The purpose of these instructions are to advise you of the law and your role in going forward into deliberations. And you will have these instructions with you when you deliberate in the event you need to reference or look up something that I read to you. So I always want people to know that. You don't have to listen to these thinking I have to remember each and every individual piece of this. You will have a reference point when you are deliberating. Members of the jury, the court will now instruct you upon the principles of law which you are to follow in considering the evidence and in reaching your verdict. It is your duty to follow all of these instructions, regardless of any opinion you may have about what the law is or ought to be. You must base your verdict on the law I give you in these instructions. Apply that law to the facts in the case, which have been properly proven by the evidence. Consider only the evidence received during this trial and the law as given to you by these instructions, and from these alone, guided by your soundest reason and best judgment, reach your verdicts. If any member of the jury has an impression of my opinion as to whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty, disregard that impression entirely and decide the issues of fact solely as you view the evidence. You, the jury, are the sole judges of the facts, and the court is the judge of the law only. Evidence is, first, the sworn testimony of witnesses, both on direct and cross-examination, regardless of who called the witness. Second, the exhibits the court has received, whether or not an exhibit goes to the jury room.
It's like that lady doesn't even
any
give a
facts
shit.
to
Like,
which the
she
lawyers
just
have
sits there.
agreed or stipulated, or which the court
Oh,
has
by the
directed
way,
you to find.
she's
I
doing
remind you that
the
in this case, the
closing.
district attorney and the attorneys for the defendant have stipulated or agreed to the existence of certain facts, and you must accept these facts as conclusively proved. Exhibit 1000 is a written copy of those stipulated facts. Count 1 of the amended information alleges that the above-named defendant, Chandler M. Halderson, on and or between July 1, 2021 and July 8, 2021 in Dane County, Wisconsin, did cause the death of Bart A. Halderson with intent to kill that person, contrary to Wis Stat 940.01 sub 1A. To this charge, Chandler M. Halderson has entered a plea of not guilty, which means the state must prove every element of the offense charged beyond a reasonable doubt. First-degree intentional homicide, as defined in Section 940.01 of the Criminal Code of Wisconsin, is committed by one who causes the death of another human being with the intent to kill that person or another. Before you may find the defendant guilty of this offense, the state must prove by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that the following two elements were present. Number one, the defendant caused the death of Bart A. Halderson. Number two, cause means that the defendant's act was a substantial factor in producing the death. Number two, the defendant acted with the intent to kill Bart A. Halderson. Intent to kill means that the defendant had the mental purpose to take the life of another human being or was aware that his conduct was practically certain to cause the death of another human being. While
2
the
to
law
3
requires that the
bullets
defendant
in his
acted with
backside.
intent to kill, it does not require that the intent exists for any particular length of time before the act is committed. The act need not be brooded over, considered, or reflected upon for a week, a day, an hour, or even a minute. There need not be any appreciable time between the formation of the intent and the act. The intent to kill may be formed at any time before the act, including the instant before the act, and must continue to exist at the time of the act. You cannot look into a person's mind to find intent. Intent to kill must be found, if found at all, from the defendant's acts, words, and statements, if any, and from all the facts and circumstances in this case bearing upon intent. Intent should not be confused with motive. While proof of intent is necessary to a conviction, proof of motive is not. Motive refers to a person's reason for doing something. While motive may be shown as a circumstance to aid in establishing the guilt of a defendant, the state is not required to prove motive on the part of a defendant in order to convict. Evidence of motive does not by itself establish guilt.
I mean, I think they
You should give it the weight you believe it
more
deserves
than
under all of the circumstances. If you are satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant caused the death of Bart A. Halderson with the intent to kill, you should find the defendant guilty of first-degree intentional homicide. If you are not so satisfied, you must find the defendant not guilty. Count 2 of the amended information alleges that the above-named defendant, Chandler M. Halderson, on and or between July 1, 2021 and July 8, 2021, in Dane County, Wisconsin, did deliver written and or oral communication with intent to induce a false belief that the defendant had knowledge of the whereabouts or physical condition of a missing person, Bart A. Halderson, contrary to section
guilty of that one.
946.48 sub 1. To this charge, Chandler M. Halderson has entered a plea of not guilty, which means that the state must prove every element of the offense charged beyond a reasonable doubt.
He knew that because
Section
he knew they were dead.
of the Criminal Code of Wisconsin is violated by one who sends, delivers, and or causes to be transmitted to another any written or oral communication with intent to induce a false belief that the sender has knowledge of the whereabouts of a missing person. Before you may find the defendant guilty of this offense, the state must prove by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that the following two elements were present. Number one, the defendant sent, delivered, or caused to be transmitted a written or oral communication to Dane County Sheriff's deputies. Number two, the defendant did so with the intent to induce a false belief that he had knowledge of the whereabouts of a missing person, specifically Bart A. Halderson. This means that the defendant had the mental purpose to cause Dane County Sheriff deputies to believe that he had knowledge of the whereabouts of a missing person, specifically Bart A. Halderson, or was aware that his conduct was practically certain to cause Dane County Sheriff deputies to believe that he had knowledge of the whereabouts of a missing person, specifically Bart A. Halderson. You cannot look into a person's mind to find intent. Intent must be found, if found at all, from the defendant's acts, words, and statements, if any, and from all the facts and circumstances in the case bearing upon intent. If you are satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that the two elements of this offense have been proved, you should find the defendant guilty. If you are not so satisfied, you must find the defendant guilty. Count 3 of information alleges that the above-named defendant, Chandler M. Halderson, on and or between July 1, 2021 and July 8, 2021, in Dane County, Wisconsin, did dismember the corpse of Bart A. Halderson with the intent to conceal a crime, contrary to Wis Stat 940.11, sub 1. To this charge, Chandler M. Halderson has entered a plea of not guilty, which means the state must prove every element of the offense charged beyond a reasonable doubt. Section 940.11 sub 1 of the Criminal Code of Wisconsin is violated by one who mutilates, disfigures, or dismembers a corpse with intent to conceal a crime or avoid apprehension for a crime. Before you may find the defendant guilty of this offense, the state must prove by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that the following two elements were present. Number one, the defendant dismembered a corpse. Number two, the defendant dismembered a corpse with the intent to conceal a crime. This requires that the defendant acted with the purpose to conceal a crime. You cannot look into a person to find intent. Intent must be found, if found at all, from the defendant's acts, words, and statements, if any, and from all the facts and circumstances in this case bearing upon intent. If you are satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that both elements of this offense have been proved, you should find the defendant guilty. If you are not so satisfied, you must find the defendant not guilty. Count 4 of the amended information alleges that the above-named defendant, Chad M. Halderson, on and or between July 1, 2021 and July 8, 2021 in Dane County,
Chandler.
Wisconsin, did hide the corpse of Bart A. Halderson with the intent to conceal the crime, contrary to Wistat, section 940.11 sub 1. To this charge, Chandler M. Halderson has entered a plea of not guilty, which means the state must prove every element of the offense charged beyond a reasonable doubt. Section 940.11 sub 2 of the Criminal Code of Wisconsin is violated by one who hides or buries a corpse with intent to conceal a crime or avoid apprehension, prosecution, or conviction for a crime. Before you may find the defendant guilty of this offense, the state must prove by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that the following 2 elements were present. Number 1, the defendant hid a corpse. Number 2, the defendant hid a corpse with intent to conceal a crime. This requires that the defendant act with the purpose to conceal.
Put him in the woods.
You cannot look into a person's mind to find intent. Intent must be found, if found at all, from the defendant's acts, words, and statements, if any, and from all the facts and circumstances in this case bearing upon intent. If you are satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that both elements of this offense have been proved, you should find the defendant guilty. If you are not so satisfied, you must find the defendant.
He hid him in the woods because he didn't want people to find out
Count 5
that he killed
of the
them.
amended information alleges that the above-named defendant,
Boom.
Chandler M. Halderson,
Guilty.
on and or between July 1, 2021 and July 8, 2021 in Dane County, Wisconsin, did cause the death of Krista R. Halderson with intent.
Oh, we're going to
kill
go
that
through
person,
all of it
contrary
again
to
for
Wistat
mommy.
section 940.01 sub 1 sub a. To this charge, Chandler M. Halderson has entered a plea of not guilty, which means the state must prove every element of the offense charged beyond a reasonable doubt. First-degree intentional homicide, as defined in section 940.01 of the Criminal Code of Wisconsin, is committed by one who causes the death of another human being with the intent to kill that person or another. Before you may find the defendant guilty of this offense, the state must prove, by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt, that the following 2 elements were present. Number 1, the defendant caused the death of Krista R. Halderson. Cause means the defendant's act was a substantial factor in producing the death. 2, the defendant acted with the intent to kill Krista R. Halderson. Intent to kill means that the defendant had the mental purpose to take the life of another human being or was aware that his conduct was practically certain to cause the death.
Technically, I don't know
While the
how
law
he
requires
killed
that
her,
the defendant acted
but
with
there's
intent to kill, it does
no
not
other
require
way.
that the intent exists for any particular length
who
of time
else-
before the act
or
is
else
committed.
did it.
The act need not be brooded
Now,
over,
they
considered,
could have
or
put on a
reflected upon
defense
for a week,
that
a day, an hour, or even a
Dad
minute.
did it,
There need not be any appreciable time between the formation of the intent and
and
the act. The intent to kill may be formed at any time before the act, including the instant
he
before the
shot
act, and must
Dad
continue to exist at the time of
to
the act.
protect
You
Mom.
cannot look into a person's mind to find intent. Intent must be found, if found at
that
all,
would have
from the
been a
defendant's
better
acts, words, and statements,
thing.
if any, and from all the
But
facts and
maybe
circumstances
that
in
would have
this
been a
case bearing upon
better
intent.
thing. Had
Intent
he
should not
not
be confused with motive. While
chopped
proof of
him up.
intent is necessary to a conviction, proof of motive is not. Motive refers to a person's reason for doing something. While motive may be shown as a circumstance to aid in establishing the guilt of a defendant, the state is not required to prove motive on the part of a defendant in order to convict.
They proved
Evidence of motive does not
intent
by itself
and motive.
establish guilt. You should give it the weight you believe it
So-
deserves under all of the circumstances. If you are satisfied beyond a reasonable
You
doubt that
proved
the defendant
intent and
caused the death
motive.
of Krista R. Halderson with the intent to
Those
kill, you
stupid,
should find the
selfish little
defendant
fucker.
guilty of first-degree intentional homicide. If you are not so satisfied, you must find the defendant not guilty. Count 6 of the amended information alleges that the above-named
I wonder if
defendant,
judges
Chandler
ever
M.
are like,
Halderson,
why am
on
I
and
even
or
reading
between
this
July
to
1,
you?
2021,
I already know
and
what
July
you're
8,
gonna do,
2021,
so I
in Dane
don't know
County,
why I'm
Wisconsin,
reading this to you.
did deliver written and or oral communication with intent to induce a false belief that the defendant had knowledge of the whereabouts or physical condition of a missing person, Krista R. Halderson, contrary to Wistat, section 946.48 sub 1. To this charge, Chandler M. Halderson has entered a plea of not guilty, which means the state must prove every element of this offense charged beyond a reasonable doubt. Section 946.48 of the Criminal Code of Wisconsin is violated by one who sends, delivers, and or causes to be transmitted to another any written or oral communication with intent to induce a false belief that the sender has knowledge of the whereabouts of a missing person. Before you may find the defendant guilty of this offense, the state must prove by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that the following two elements were present. Number one, the defendant sent, delivered, or caused to be transmitted a written or oral communication to the Dane County Sheriff's Department deputies. Number two, the defendant did so with the intent to induce a false belief that he had knowledge of the whereabouts of a missing person, specifically Krista R. Halderson. This means that the defendant had the mental purpose to cause Dane County Sheriff deputies to believe that he had knowledge of the whereabouts of a missing person, specifically Krista R. Halderson, or was aware that his conduct was practically certain to cause Dane County Sheriff deputies to believe that he had knowledge of the whereabouts of a missing person, specifically Krista R. Halderson. You cannot look into a person's mind to find intent. Intent must be found, if found at all, from the defendant's acts, words, and statements, if any, and from all the facts and circumstances in this case bearing upon intent. If you are satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that the two elements of this offense have been proved, you should find the defendant guilty. If you are not so satisfied, you must find the defendant not guilty. Count 7 of the amended information alleges that the above-named defendant, Chandler M. Halderson, on and or between July 1, 2021 and July 8, 2021 in Dane County, Wisconsin, did dismember the corpse of Krista R. Halderson with the intent to conceal a crime, contrary to Wistat Section 940.11 sub 1. To this charge, Chandler M. Halderson has entered a plea of not guilty, which means the state must prove every element of the offense charged beyond a reasonable doubt. Section 940.11 sub 1 of the Criminal Code of Wisconsin is violated by one who mutilates, disfigures, or dismembers a corpse with intent to conceal a crime or avoid apprehension, prosecution, or conviction for a crime. Before you may find the defendant guilty of this offense, the state must prove by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that the following two elements were present. Number one, the defendant dismembered a corpse. Number two, the defendant dismembered a corpse with the intent to conceal a crime. This requires that the defendant acted with the purpose to conceal a crime. You cannot look into the person's mind for intent. The defendant's acts, words, and statements, if any, and from all the facts and circumstances in this case, intent. If you are satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that both elements of this offense have been proved, you should find the defendant guilty. If you are not so satisfied, you must find the defendant not guilty. Count 8 of the amended information alleges that the above-named defendant, Chandler M. Halderson, on and or between July 1, 2021 and July 8, 2021 in Dane County, Wisconsin, did hide the corpse of Krista R. Halderson with the intent to conceal a crime, contrary to Wistat Section 940.11 sub 2. To this charge, Chandler M. Halderson has entered a plea of not guilty, which means the state must prove every element of the offense charged beyond a reasonable doubt. Section 940.11 sub 2 of the Criminal Code of Wisconsin is violated by one who hides or buries a corpse with intent to conceal a crime or avoid apprehension, prosecution, or conviction for a crime. Before you may find the defendant guilty of this offense, the state must prove by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that the following two elements were present. Number one, the defendant hid a corpse. Number two, the defendant hid a corpse with intent to conceal a crime. This requires that the defendant acted with the purpose to conceal a crime. You cannot look into a person's mind to find intent. Intent must be found, if found at all, from a defendant's acts, words, and statements, if any, and from all the facts and circumstances in this case bearing upon intent. If you are satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that both elements of this offense have been proved, you should find the defendant guilty. If you are not so satisfied, you must find the defendant not guilty. In reaching your verdicts, examine the evidence with care and caution. Act with judgment, reason, and prudence. Defendants are not required to prove their innocence. The law presumes every person charged with the commission of an offense to be innocent. This presumption requires a finding of not guilty unless, in your deliberations, you find it is overcome by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty. The burden of establishing every fact necessary to constitute guilt is upon the state. Before you can return a verdict of guilty, the evidence must satisfy you beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty. If you can reconcile the evidence upon any reasonable hypothesis consistent with the defendant's innocence, you should do so and return a verdict of not guilty. The term reasonable doubt means a doubt based upon reason and common sense. It is a doubt for which a reason can be given, arising from a fair and rational consideration of the evidence or lack of evidence. It means such a doubt as would cause a person of ordinary prudence to pause or hesitate when called upon to act in the most important affairs of life. A reasonable doubt is not a doubt which is based upon mere guesswork or speculation. A doubt which arises merely from sympathy or from fear to return a verdict of guilt is not a reasonable doubt. A reasonable doubt is not a doubt such as may be used to escape the responsibility of a decision. While it is your duty to give the defendant the benefit of every reasonable doubt, you are not to search for doubt. You are to decide whether the state has overcome the presumption of the defendant's innocence and proven the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. An amended information is nothing more than a written formal accusation against a defendant charging the commission of one or more criminal acts. You are not to consider it as evidence against the defendant in any way. It does not raise any inference of guilt. Disregard entirely any question that the court did not allow to be answered. Do not guess at what the witness's answer might have been. If the question itself suggested that certain information might be true, ignore the suggestion and do not consider it as evidence. Attorneys for each side have the right and the duty to object to what they consider are improper questions asked of witnesses and to the admission of other evidence which they believe is not properly admissible. You should not draw any conclusion from the fact an objection was made. By allowing testimony or other evidence to be received over the objection of counsel, the court is not indicating any opinion about the evidence. You jurors are the judges of the credibility of the witnesses and the weight of the evidence. An exhibit becomes evidence only when received by the court. An exhibit marked for identification and not received is not evidence. An exhibit received is evidence, whether or not it goes to the jury room. Remarks of the attorneys are not evidence. If the remarks suggested certain facts not in evidence, disregard that suggestion. The weight of evidence does not depend on the number of witnesses on each side. You may find that the testimony of one witness is entitled to greater weight than that of another witness or even of several other witnesses. It is not necessary that every fact be proved directly by a witness or an exhibit. A fact may be proved indirectly by circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial evidence is evidence from which a jury may logically find other facts, according to common knowledge and experience. Circumstantial evidence is not necessarily better or worse than direct evidence. Either type of evidence can prove a fact. Whether evidence is direct or circumstantial, it must satisfy you beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant committed the offense before you find the defendant guilty. Evidence has been presented relating to the defendant's conduct after the alleged crime was committed. Whether the evidence shows a consciousness of guilt and whether consciousness of guilt shows actual guilt are matters exclusively for you to decide. In weighing the evidence, you may take into account matters of your common knowledge and your observations and experience in the affairs of life. Ordinarily, a witness may testify only about facts. However, a witness with expertise in a particular field may give an opinion in that field. In determining the weight to give to this opinion, you should consider the qualifications and credibility of the witness, the facts upon which the opinion is based, and the reasons given for the opinion. Opinion evidence was received to help you reach a conclusion. However, you are not bound by any witness expert's opinion. It is the duty of the jury to scrutinize and to weigh the testimony of witnesses and to determine the effect of the evidence as a whole. You are the sole judges of the credibility, that is, the believability of the witnesses and of the weight to be given to their testimony. In determining the credibility,
so if you don't believe the witnesses, you can say they are fucking liars, and I don't believe you. So
in the result of the trial, the witness's conduct, appearance, and demeanor on the witness stand, the clearness or lack of clearness of the witness's recollections, the opportunity the witness had for observing and for knowing the matters the witness testified about, the reasonableness of the witness's testimony, the apparent intelligence of the witness, bias or prejudice, if any has been shown, possible motives for falsifying testimony, and all other facts and circumstances during the trial, which can then give to the testimony of each witness the weight and belief it should
Your
receive.
Honor.
There's no magic way for you to evaluate the testimony. Instead,
Your
you should
Honor.
use your common sense and experience. In everyday life, you determine for yourselves the reliability of things people say to you. You should do the same thing here.
Come on with it,
The
then.
defendant in a criminal case has the
That's what he
absolute
told her.
constitutional
Come
right
on with it, then.
not to testify. The defendant's decision to testify
kidding
must
me?
not be considered by you in any way and must
Did y'all
not
watch
influence
that?
in any manner. Consider carefully the arguments of the attorneys, but their arguments and conclusions and opinions are not
Man.
evidence. Draw your own conclusions from the evidence and decide upon your verdicts according to the
Why would you
evidence
kick
under
me
these instructions
off,
given to you by the court.
StreamYard?
This time I would invite the state to present its closing
Oh,
argument.
shit. Oh, shit. Oh, shit. Oh, shit.
And is HDMI left on, Your Honor?
Girl, shut up.
HDMI left. Good morning.
Hold on,
I
let's
always
lay
start my
down.
closing arguments in the same way. And it's simply
Okay.
this. If any of the attorneys, either throughout the trial or during closings today, from either side, myself, Mr. Brown, or the defense, state a fact or evidence among things about it, and sometimes not intentionally, but sometimes people, misremember something or think of one thing they read. So please use your collective memories as jurors to determine what you heard and what you saw. Additionally, it should be the written law that the judge just read and that you will get a copy of that should determine how you process and think of the law. For years, I've listened to attorneys where prosecutors have basically belittled the burden of proof and where the defense has built it up to be something that can never be overcome or could only be overcome by video. Neither of those things are true. You should look at the written law. The written law. What I want to say is I want to apologize for all the graphic photos that you folks had to
Well,
look at
it's
the last
Chandler's
few weeks.
fault.
I'm sorry I had to show them to you, but we had to.
It's
They were
cold in
crimes that
there.
were Part of a crime, and because of
Girl.
the charges and what we have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, it was necessary for you to look at some of those photos. I will promise, though, today I will not be showing you those anymore. There will be none of those photos in my closing.
Fix your PowerPoint.
So
Aw.
every case that comes in is kind of like a puzzle. You have to look at it because obviously you weren't there. But
Hey, guys.
solving a case and thinking about whether or not a person is guilty or not guilty is like putting together a puzzle. And it's your job as the jury to put that puzzle together. But the question in this case, or why this
Clever.
case is kind of unique, is the person who committed the crime had 8 days to spread the pieces of that puzzle all over the state of Wisconsin, or at least southern Wisconsin. Now, what are the pieces of those puzzle? They're evidence. What is evidence? It's what you saw in this courtroom and what you heard in this courtroom, testimony. People sitting on the witness stand and telling you what they knew. Before we start off going through that evidence, I want to remind you of the background of the events before July 1st of 2021.
Was that intentional that she said it was
In
a
June
puzzle?
of 2021,
Because
Bart
they
and
took them
Krista
apart
Halderson,
and you had to put them back
lived at
together?
4595 Oak Spring Circle with their son, Chandler Halderson.
Was that her intention?
And at that time in June, they thought that their son had an internship with American Family, although there was problems with the payment. He hadn't been working there about 6-7 months, hadn't been paid yet. They thought their son was attending an ATC, that he had already earned a solar certificate there, and that he was enrolled in the IT program and was one class away from graduating. They also thought that he was going to soon be going to a job in Titusville, Florida at SpaceX. Now, things became a little suspicious to the father, Bart Halderson, who's an accountant. He's wondering, why is a Fortune 500 company not paying my son when he's working there?
Wasn't getting any money?
And for over a year, he was talking to various people at Madison College or MATC about why he hadn't gotten his son's transcripts, why they couldn't get a meeting, why he hadn't received his solar certificate. He had been emailing with these three people, Aaron Hoover, Daniel Spieth, and Alyssa Brandt, and been communicating with them. This all kind of comes to a crescendo or to a head the day before Bart is murdered. And on that day, he has a phone call with Omar Job. He starts off this phone call, you can just tell in his voice, he's angry, because he thinks this college has been giving him and his son the runaround for about a year. They're not doing their job. And so he's kind of aggressive at the beginning of this call. You don't really like him until you know the whole story. And he learns during this call that his son is not enrolled in the IT program, that his son owes the college over $1,000, and that Alyssa Brandt, Aaron Hoover, and Daniel Spieth have never worked for Madison College. We see, and that is the background that lead us into the events of July 1st, 2021. On that day is started by Chandler messaging his girlfriend. 7:26 a.m., I hardly slept. 7:27 a.m., I don't know, stuff really hasn't been going well for me lately. So I'm trying to plan the next thing to fuck me over. We know at 7:27 a.m., his mom leaves for work. She works customer service at Zimbrick. She heads to work. We then know at 7:51 a.m., Chandler messages his girlfriend. Yeah, I had a great future planned and it's falling apart. Now, what does he know at this point? His dad does send him a text message the day before saying, I spoke to Omar Job. I honestly don't know if that meant anything to Chandler or not, but things are coming to a crescendo. And what we do know is he texts his girlfriend at 1:04 p.m. I overheard that they may go to the cabin with their friends. I don't know, but I don't know. We also know that on Bart's work calendar, he has a meeting with Chandler and MATC. I don't know if Bart confronted him the night before. I don't know if Bart was going to see how long this ruse or how elaborate this ruse was going to get, but this topic was going to be discussed and there would be a coming to terms. We know that at 2:10 p.m., I'm ready whenever you are. What happened next? Well, we have to look at the evidence. There's a spent shell casing in the basement of the home. There's a bullet fragment, noticeable reddish brown staining, also test positive for Bart's DNA. That's the bullet that went through and through Bart. The spent casing, and that casing tested positive as being shot from the rifle that belonged to Chandler. We know that Chandler got this rifle about 2 weeks prior, and it was found in the barn on Irwin Road. We know that he got it from his friend Smith, and he was given a bunch of ammo. We also see evidence in the basement of a divot from Ricochet, a fresh divot. Also blood, a quadrillion times more likely to be Bart than any other unknown person. More blood. And we know that Chandler texted his mom this. Dad's phone died. Text or call me. Remember, Dad's phone had a charger right there on the desk. You can plug your phone in and within 10 seconds send a text message. I think here there's a half-truth. Dad's dead. Dad died. Oh, and get me soda on your way home. I have an extra hour of work. We know Chandler didn't have a job. He's stalling. Get his mom to take more time. Okay, I can, she says, smiley face. We know that she returns to the house at 5:12 p.m. We also know that her blood is found in the basement as well. And at 5:11 p.m., Chandler starts writing the following note. Weekend chores, H2O2 and lemon. So that's hydrogen peroxide, which cleans up blood, and lemon, which is a deodorizer. Door handles, move your shit upstairs, get a job. Interesting, if he would have just gotten a job, he wouldn't have had to do the prior 3. And clean the floor. That came back in the search warrant for his Google account. We also know at 7:49 p.m., he's in the shower FaceTiming his girlfriend. So he cleans up. Then departs at 8:16 that night for Quick Trip. We see him there at the Quick Trip. There's the Vovo, there he is. He buys 20 pounds of ice. Home at 8:29 p.m. Then we, somewhere between 8:30 and 9:30, the neighbor, Steve Greiber, smells a weird burning, a pungent burning that he describes like a pig roast. And you heard testimony from Fire Inspector Bill Boswell that unfortunately in his line of work, he's come across many burned bodies, human bodies, and that they do in fact smell like a pig roast. Moving on to Friday, July 2nd. We know throughout that night, and I'm not re-showing this video, but there's hours of this video. We know that we see burning in the fireplace and the garage light go on and off. All throughout the night. There it is, almost 3 a.m. Until at one point it kind of crescendos and dies down. We also know, looking at the living room of the Halderson home, that right there by the fireplace is a measuring tape. Folks, he measured the parts of the body to see if they were small enough to fit into the fireplace. And a fan, add oxygen to that fire, make it burn a little bit hotter. We know that it burned hot enough that it damaged the fireplace. The door shattered, and the paint is visibly peeling and bubbling. We also know that there's blood evidence. Evidence of cleanup from the luminol photos, as well as droplets of blood. That those stains test positive for blood, and that they test positive for Bart and Krista's DNA. There is also some DNA from Chandler. He did cut his foot. We're not disputing that. But he cut his foot in the process of dismembering and blowing and burning his parents, not from playing ball with the dogs. More blood. That's also dad. And of course, on top of this fireplace that then is made to look all pristine with papers that date to June 23rd, not in the winter from when you would have last actually had a real fire, but from June 23rd, there's a piece of skull. And so Dr. Christina Figueroa Soto gets involved in this case. And she finds bones. She finds lots of bones. They go into this ash trap. I had never even heard of an ash trap before. Clearly, neither had Mr. Halderson. But they find a total of 230 bone fragments. She's able to say 106 of them were substantial enough that she's able to say what they were, that they were human and what parts of the body they're from. 53 from the skull or cranium, 18 from the hands, 24 teeth, 8 vertebrae, 3 long bones, either from arms or legs. There's also evidence in the garage. We have blood staining on shoes. That blood staining tests positive for both Bart and Krista and is identified as blood, not just touch DNA. More staining on the shoes, Bart. And in the shoes, they test the inside of the shoes as well to see whose shoes these belong to. They're Chandler's. They're his size 10.5. Oh, and he's wearing them right there. Those are the shoes he wore. In the garage, there's an axe found. And there's blood staining on this axe. It's positive for human blood on the hilt. It's positive for human blood on the head. On the head of the axe is both Bart and Krista's DNA. On the hilt is both Bart and Krista's DNA. And look at those numbers. A quadrillion times more likely to be those two than an unknown person. That's 1,000 times the world's population. And on the handle, Bart and Krista's DNA as well. We know at 7:02 a.m. that morning, that's a Friday morning of a holiday weekend, okay? July 3rd, Friday morning, a 23-year-old at 7:02 a.m. gets up, drives to Fleet Farm. Again, wearing those shoes. He buys a tarp.
A tarp.
There's that tarp, 6x8. That tarp is later found in a trash bin at the Irwin Road property out in the woods. He returns home at 7:31. And we see the following, throughout the day, we see the following text messages between him and his girlfriend. We're set for this. We just need ice. And now hydrogen peroxide, because I stepped on glass. Later, there's more talk, whether she will come or not. But if your mom has an extra bottle, that'd be great. And a Swiffer wet jet. Okay, I do kind of, and there's more talk about whether or not Kat will be there and what time. And Chandler responds, okay, I do kind of need the Swiffer and the peroxide and stuff. Oh, and remember ice. Didn't he just buy 20 pounds of ice less than 12 hours earlier? But he needs more ice. What does he need that ice for? Well, the fireplace broke. We know there's a freezer. He bought lots of ice, and that freezer tested positive for human blood.
Fireplace broke?
Parts of his mom and his dad were put in that freezer. We know that night on the 2nd, one of Krista's coworkers, Daniel Croninger, came to the house. He had heard that day that Krista no-called and no-showed for work, and that is not the Krista he knew. She had worked there for several years and had never done that before, just not the type of person she was. I mean, of course, I never met her, but she seems a little type A. Like, she liked things to be in order, liked things to be a certain way, and was responsible. So he comes over, and Chandler begins to tell the tale of, yeah, they went up to the cabin. They left this morning with some mystery couple. You know, she probably just forgot to take off, even though her boss testified that she would often take off a year in advance to get the dates right and had dates planned out in the future. But Daniel seems to be somewhat satisfied with that. Here's the problem. Krista's phone is responding to towers in her house. She didn't go anywhere. She never left that house. There are cameras on every side of that house. We know when Krista went in, and we never see her leave. This is not a whodunit, folks. That house is surrounded by cameras. We know who came and left.
And that was a
And we
poor
know that her
choice.
phone was found in a shoe,
shirt.
hidden under a shelf, behind other shoes, wrapped in tinfoil, wrapped in a paper towel. Dan leaves about 10 minutes later after talking with Chandler, and Kat arrives and spends the night. And they spend the night on this couch fort. You probably thought, why are they putting in evidence about that? Who cares where they slept? This is why it's important. A normal bed, a queen size, is about 5 feet wide. 2 people can sleep there really comfortably, and for the most part, not disturb one another, unless you're a rather light sleeper. But Chandler has a problem. He has body parts in the basement of his home, in the freezer. What if Kat gets a hankering for some ice cream and goes in there like she had before? He needs to be able to control her that night. He needs to be able to know if she wakes up and where she goes if she does. So he builds this, a thing that has walls where you really can't get in and out of it gracefully. It's his way to know where she's at. I'm not sure if his girlfriend realizes how lucky she actually is. Saturday, July 3rd, 2021.
I don't exactly.
Kat
by
leaves
that
at
part,
6:55 a.m. She has a job. And we know at 7:47 a.m., Chandler is once again up and leaving the house, headed for Roxbury. How do we know that he's headed for Roxbury? His Snapchat shows him there. Kat kind of keeps track of Chandler's location, and they snap each other all the time. She finds him there.
She knew exactly where he was. Stop
And
it.
he's quite close to where the remains were found. We also know that is an area he frequented. That's a picture of him
That is
about a year
stupid
before,
picture.
standing there with a knife. And that white tent in the background, that's where they found Mom's legs. Dr. Rogalska performed the autopsy of the legs. And there's only certain things she can tell us from the limited amount of human body remaining that she was able to do an autopsy of. She can say that Krista Halderson was dismembered post-mortem, so after death. She also, looking at a totality of the circumstances, puts the cause of death as homicidal violence. Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot tell you if Krista was shot, strangled, stabbed, or something else. I can't. What I can tell you is we have 5 bullets missing from a magazine, and we know that Bart Halderson was shot 2 or 3 times. So there are 2 missing bullets, but I don't know if she was shot. What I do know is she entered the house, and it was only Bart and Chandler there. No one else. She died of homicidal violence. Manner of death, homicide. And those are legal documents that the ME has to put these determinations on. We know that Chandler arrives back home at 9:31 a.m. Later that day, he goes to Dulce's house, and he returns at 3:07 p.m. And that night, though, we know he leaves his house at 10:08 p.m. And we know he goes up to Portage along the Wisconsin River. From his house to Portage and back. He's up in the Portage area from at least 10:37 p.m. to 11:03 p.m. Portage is along the Wisconsin River. We tried to search that area. Wisconsin River has a very strong current. People drown there every year. We never find their bodies, and their bodies are whole. They attempted a dive. It was unsafe. We didn't find any evidence there. But I think in the totality of the circumstances, that wasn't a nighttime trip to go swimming. We know he returns at 11:30 p.m. And then we go on to July 4th. July 4th is actually the day that is the most eerie to me, because it's like Chandler Halderson pushed pause on his crime and just lived a normal life for a day. On July 4th, he spends the day with his girlfriend and his girlfriend's family. He goes to the farm, uses the pool, eats dinner, they have some sort of barbecue, and he asks permission to return the next day and use the pool. On that day, he does do one thing concerning his crime. Oh, and then he goes to fireworks that night at Dan Croninger's house. He does send this text message that he says tells everyone is from his mom. And it is made from mom's phone, that again is in the house, in shoes, hiding in the garage. Made it safely. Can't get anything through. And yes, it's packed. Going to White Lake today for the parade. We'll be home Monday night or Tuesday early. Love you lots. Mom ended a lot of her text messages to Chandler. Love you lots. Couple problems with the text message. First, the parade was on Saturday, not Sunday. Second, the phone never leaves Windsor, Wisconsin. Monday, July 5th. We know that Kat had stayed over the night before, and she leaves at 7:47. We know that that day is supposedly Chandler's big doctor appointment at 2 p.m. We know that it's at a UW clinic on Park Street because there's conversation between Kat and Chandler about her potentially taking him, trying to get off of work, and she actually Googles the directions. Here's his text messages to her. Made it a bit ago and checked in. This is at 2:09. Just need you to know because I have horrible reception. 2:22. No connection to even load Snapchat. 2:24. And no Wi-Fi. 2:24. What UW clinic doesn't have Wi-Fi? They took an X-ray and CT scan. Nothing bad on the X-ray. CT scan, hun. They haven't determined anything, but with my legs, like they were, and I gotta wait to hear what they determined. Chandler never went to any doctor's appointment. He's at home, sending these text messages to his girlfriend, keeping up his ruse.
She also knew
Nowhere
that
close
she
to
could
Madison,
check that.
certainly not on Park Street. He does leave the house though that day. At 4:30 p.m., he goes to the farm. We know about that. He leaves a voicemail for Cress, and then him and Cress end up having an interaction. And there's this whole conversation about using the pool. We also hear from both Cress and Dulce that they went by the pool and there was no Chandler. So they take their little lawnmower. What did Dulce say? Granny's on a lawnmower. And they ride to where his car is. And the back is up, the trunk door, the hatch. And no Chandler. It's by the wood line. They see Chandler at some point kind of exit from the wood line. And indeed, his phone does have him there. And Cress is concerned enough. She thinks something's happening. I don't think she thought this, but she thought something was happening. So she asks the deputies to come take a look out in the woods there. So Brent Baverstock comes. He sees turkey vultures. He knows what he's about to find. He probably thinks he's going to find a whole body, but he knows what he's about to find. And there was Bart Halderson's torso. Dr. Breslauer did the autopsy of Bart's torso. She said he had at least 2 gunshot wounds, possibly 3. She couldn't tell because some of the deterioration of the muscle, whether or not it was like 1 wound tract or 2. So at least 2, but maybe 3. That he was shot in the back at least twice. that there was bullet material located in his body, and that one shot was a contact wound. The muzzle of the gun was touching his skin on the back. This wasn't a, oops, the gun went off. This is a, got you, you're dead. Cause of death, gunshot wounds. Manner of death, homicide. Can't shoot yourself in the back. So deputies begin to search this property. It's a vast property, maybe about 45 acres. A lot of it's prairie, a lot of it's woods. But they find this oil drum that has this weird cutout. And so they look in there and they find tools. And those tools then are tested by the Wisconsin State Crime Lab. The all-way handsaw has human blood identified as Bart and Krista. The broken saw blade has blood, it's Bart's. The scissors has blood, Bart and Krista's. And again, look at those numbers, 1,000 times the world's population. There's also some pruning shears. Again, tested positive for human blood, Bart and Krista. And the head had Bart. Some of these tools were then sent to Dr. Figueroa Soto. And she did a detailed analysis. She talked a lot about, well, things I don't really understand. But here's the basics of what I understood and what her reports say. Is that this always saw has a certain number of T current, this broken handsaw has a certain number of T current. She can look microscopically at the wounds and tell us what tools are consistent with the markings that she saw. On Bart Halderson, his fourth cervical vertebrae is consistent with the broken handsaw. That's the tool that Chandler used to cut off his dad's head.
Jesus.
And of course, that handsaw, or that blade, has DNA parts. Tools used to dismember Bart Halderson: the right humerus, consistent with that all-way super saw, right femur, consistent with the all-way super saw, and left femur, consistent with the all-way super saw. That's that saw. Again, has Bart's DNA.
Super saw.
Blood. Alice McMahon from the Wisconsin State Crime Lab also looked at some of these items found on the Irwin Road farm. She looked at that saw blade and she compared it to the saw handle found in the garage of the Halderson home.
Hidden.
And she did what she does. She took measurements.
Because that she was in the drawer of the toolbox.
And found that they were a match. That those items fit. She put together two puzzle pieces. An item from Irwin Road matched an item in the garage of the Halderson home.
Oh, look. The puzzle analogy came full circle.
She also took a look at the tarp in the garbage can. And there's a couple links back to the house with this garbage can. There's an extra lid to a garbage can up in that room that was, I think, at one time a bathroom and that they were remodeling. And there's also a matching sort of container in the garage. Inside of that container found on the farm is a piece of yellow duct tape. That duct tape had blood. That was Bart Halderson's. On that tarp inside of that trash bin, there's more yellow tape. More yellow tape. And there's yellow duct tape found in the house. So Annalise McMahon pieced these together microscopically to see if they were a match. And she looked at them and found that they were all one continuous piece of tape. That's the tape he wrapped around the tarp to seal up his dad's torso. There's a
But okay, but then what's the rope for? Explain the rope.
And tested positive for blood. Analyst Matson looked at some various items from the farm as well. She looked at that same tarp and found a fingerprint from Chandler. Now remember that tarp we have Chandler buying at Fleet Farm. It would have been bought and packaged with no fingerprints on it. Here we find it covered in blood with his fingerprint. She also looked at that tarp that was in that bin and looked at it for footwear impression analysis. Could she see some prints on it, and can we match those up to some shoes? Maybe that'll help us figure out who that is, who was on that tarp. She's able to match it up to Brooks 5 launch shoes. A pair of Brooks 5 launch shoes in a size 10.5 were found in the Halderson garage. Again, those are the same ones that have blood on them. And
oh my God.
A second tarp was found in the barn. It is an older tarp. They tried to do footwear analysis on it, came back to a Ralph Polo shoe. We never found one of those. But again, that's an older tarp. We don't know if possibly it was before the homicides or after, or if there was a pair of shoes that were ditched somewhere. But that tarp, once again, is covered in blood that tests positive for both Bart and Krista. Now, you saw a picture of Bart working on that tarp. What you didn't see on that tarp was a bunch of blood stains because they weren't there. This blood is from this crime. Chandler gets home from the farm at 8:54 in the evening after going to the farm and later having dinner with Kat. But that night, he's not done. Early in the morning of the 6th, we see the fireplace burning more. Not as great as before, but some burning. We also see that garage light on and off, on and off. I think it's a total of 7 times, Deputy Wilk. And that's throughout the night. And we know at 4:30 that morning, Chandler leaves and goes into Madison. We know he goes into Madison from his phone records. We don't know what he did there, but we do know it was a trip that started out in the dark. We know he didn't have a job. And we know Madison's surrounded by lakes. Use your common sense.
I hate when they say that.
Wednesday, July 7th. We know the Subaru departs at 9:36 and that Chandler goes to the farm. We know he goes to the farm from both his phone records, but also from this text exchange with Kat. Kat texts Chandler asking where he's going, and he replies, farm, but no one here, so leaving. We also know that out in the farm was found a Target bag that had been at Chandler's house. How do we know that? Because it has Kat's name on it from the pickup order of the stuff she brought over to Chandler's house and she testified about. That bag is full of bloody rags. We heard from Chris, those aren't from her house, and Catherine, that those aren't her rags. Chandler took a bag full of bloody rags, disposed of it at the farm, and a bag with Kat's name on it. And those tested positive for blood, but were not suitable for DNA testing. He comes back to his house after being at the farm, and he leaves and he goes and reports his parents missing at the police department. So he reports his parents missing. Later that evening, he has a couple of visitors. There's close family friends, the Hilgendorfs, and there's 2 girls that are about the same age as the Halderson brothers, and they go over to try to comfort Chandler, because that's what Krista would want them to do, one of them testified. So that's what they were gonna do. They go over there, and through a series of events, Chandler starts giving them legal advice about police cooperation. You know, you don't have to turn your phone over to police. They don't have to image it. You can just take screenshots and text it to them. Your parents are allegedly missing. You just reported them to the police. And you're encouraging people not to be fully cooperative with police? He then later has pizza that night with Mary Sesto and tells Mary Sesto, she starts saying, well, can't they just ping your parents' phones? Wouldn't that work? And he said, no, they can't ping a cell phone. She, disagrees with him. Yeah, you can. He looked her in the eye, she testified, and coldly said, no, they can't. She was nervous enough of Chandler at that point that she testified that she put herself between the exit door and Chandler. At that point, she knew something had happened. She just didn't have the evidence to back it up yet, just her gut feeling. On July 8th, Chandler goes around the neighborhood and questions neighbors concerning video footage. In all fairness, his uncle did recommend that he do this, but his uncle also said it's to preserve that evidence. If you watch those videos and listen to that audio, when people in his neighbors say, yeah, I turned it over to the police yesterday, he doesn't say, okay, thank you. He starts asking him questions. Does your camera pick up the road? Does it pick up my house? Does it pick up my driveway? He's not trying to help the investigation. He's trying to figure out, are the police on to me yet? He gives media interviews to 3 different stations. And as more and more squad cars arrive, he starts calling the police, asking, hey, what's up? Also that day, on July 8th, he does some Google searches. The timing of these searches is incredibly important, folks. Those searches happened at 9:44 and 9:45 a.m. Torso is not found until 3 p.m. Krista's legs are not found until a week later. And what is he Googling? Body found, Wisconsin. Women's body found, Wisconsin. Wisconsin dismembered body found. Dead body found, Wisconsin. I think it's interesting what he wasn't Googling. Jane Doe, John Doe in hospital in Wisconsin. Car crashes in northern Wisconsin. Crimes in White Lake, Wisconsin. Drownings on Sawyer Lake where their cabin is. Or organizations that maybe can help start a manhunt. I think it's also worth noting he had 2 vehicles available, never even went looking for his parents. There's a reason. He knew where they were. He put them there. It's also worth noting that the analyst yesterday, Courtney Ripp, testified that she didn't have any Google searches before July 8th to even look at. So that either means that Chandler never Googled anything for the entire time period of those search warrants, or he cleared his history every day. On this day he was arrested. He didn't have a chance to clear his history. So he's taken down to the station where he gives about an 1.5 to 2 hour interview, where he gives the same lie of this mystery couple of, taking lots of alcohol to the cabin, taking a large amount of cash, because, accountants love to keep large amounts of cash around. And at some point, Detective Hendrickson is like, we know you're lying. We know your parents are no longer here. Why don't you tell us the truth? And at that point, Chandler's arrested. So that's the evidence, folks. That's the pieces of the puzzle in this case. It's not a whodunit. Cameras all around. We know that Bart and Krista went into that home and never came out, at least as whole people. That their bodies were found dismembered, discarded, and hidden throughout the southern half of Wisconsin. That's what the evidence shows. We have experts from DNA, fracture matching, trace, footwear, fire inspector. We have bones in the ashtray. Chandler Halderson killed his parents. But I think it's very important to point out that Bart and Krista Halderson are not a puzzle. So it's a good metaphor. It's a helpful metaphor, perhaps, to look at evidence. But they are two people that were very much alive on June 30th of 2021. They are two people that deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. They were somebody's spouse, somebody's parents, somebody's brother, somebody's sister. They were loved by their neighbors. They had close friends. They had jobs. They were normal folks just trying to live a normal life. They don't even get to be buried next to each other. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm asking that you
bury parts of them together,
Halderson, and that you treat them with the dignity and respect that their own son has never given them. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Raymond. Does anybody need a break?
Nope. Keep it going.
Thank you. Please be seated. Just so you know, folks, Randy determined that it's easier to collect the notebooks at this point, and then once we know who the alternates are, he'll have to spend a moment sorting them out, but that way they're not in your way. Attorney General, would you please present the defense closing?
Thank you.
Ugh.
Taking it back 2 weeks ago, roughly, we were told that opening instructions, like closing arguments, are not evidence. But what it is a roadmap of how their case is going to go and how our case is going to go. So you have an idea, as you're hearing all this evidence, how this case is going to go from both sides. From the beginning, we told you that this case was about the
beginning.
I listened to Attorney Brown's again as I was getting ready, and there were some things that he noted that I think are important. First off, towards the end of his opening, he apologized for some things. Essentially, he apologized for doing his job. He said it might be repetitive, it might be boring at times, but he needs to do it because he has a constitutional obligation to present their case, and they only have one, and that's fair. So now it's my turn to apologize. I am going to apologize for doing my job.
You didn't.
First, a lot of people think my job is to, quote unquote, get the defendant off on their charges, to object to every single question that's asked, to ask any question I possibly can of witnesses, to be loud, obnoxious, and make a scene so I can try to get this person off of their charges. It's not. My job to make sure my job, they're doing it because they can do it beyond a reasonable doubt. They can prove those charges beyond a reasonable doubt. Reasonable doubt. And if you think that it's a cop-out, well, then your issue is not with me. Your issue is not with Chandler. Your issue is with the U.S. Constitution that says that without them, you don't have me. And without me, you don't have them. My job is to make sure that the state, with all of its powers, look, they even have more tables than we do, that they do their job. And I'm going to do that job today. The thing that I want to address, evidence. The first thing I want to address is sort of the obvious. Chandler lies. He told a lot of lies. Not only does he lie, but he goes to extreme lengths, if you will, to keep those lies going, or to perhaps cover up those lies. I guarantee you, every single person in this room has told a lie, has either covered up that lie, or has done something to keep that lie going. Maybe not now, maybe when you were a teenager. Go back to high school. I'm sure you lied to your parents all the time. You're not on trial, so your lies are not exaggerated and highlighted right now. But they are here.
Depends on who you ask.
And the important part is that Chandler is not charged with lying to his girlfriend or to his parents. There's one charge that has to deal, one per parent, that has to deal with lying. Everything else is something that the state told you to try to feed you a theory, a motive, and to essentially taint your view on Chandler. So when we were going over jury selection, I asked you, how would you feel if he didn't testify? And a couple of people said I wouldn't need to hear from him. A couple of people said that they would treat him the same way they would do every witness. Bullshit. He lies, and they did a great job of making it known that he lies. If he testified, you were not going to believe anything he said. I also said there was a game day decision, and most of the times it is a game day decision. This never was.
She just said bullshit. Attorneys don't
If you heard from him, were
cuss.
you even going to believe him? You weren't, and that's fine.
Unless they're
It doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, there's
Woe
one
team.
lie that really does matter, and that's the one that he said about his
Something.
parents missing.
That is
I'm going to make
rude.
your life a little easier, and it's going to be a little unconventional. there are certain charges that I believe the state has met their burden and they have proved it beyond a reasonable doubt. And again, from the beginning, first-degree intentional homicide is a serious charge. We've been here for the homicides. A piece of paper that is signed, a formal piece of paper that's signed by Chandler to the Dane County Sheriff's Office about a missing persons, that clearly is not true. This is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. I want you to think about that when it comes to talking about these homicides. I also want you to think about another thing. I made a weird noise, I apologize. But I want you to think about another thing. When Attorney Raymond did her closing, two phrases, if you will, really caught on. Several times she said, we know X, Y, and Z happened. We know that this happened. Pay attention to the times where she said, we don't know. We don't know. I can't tell you how she was killed. We don't know whatever. And it was always in the parts that had to do with the homicides. When I was in law school, I was told that the words I don't know should never come from that table. Because you should know. If you're charging people with crimes, you should know.
Well, we would know
So
if your client
the evidence that I think that they skipped over
didn't
that matters for me in
dismember
that first-degree intentional
and hide
homicide
the
is not
bodies.
something that they met their burden on. I first want to talk about the cabin. There is a cabin. There's no disputing that. Bart and Krista went to the cabin at least 2 or 3 times a year, I think is what someone testified to. It's possible that they could have gone to the cabin that weekend. In fact, you don't even know
their
what
phones
weekend
never
plans
left the
were.
house.
Friends testified. None of them said, oh, they were going to come over to watch fireworks with us. So no one knew what their plans were that weekend. The reason they're making a big deal about it is because that is some kind of premeditation to them. That is some kind of intent. Ooh, he was going to do something that day. He knew he was going to do something that day, so he was going to say something about going to the cabin.
I don't even think it was
He's talking to his
premeditated.
girlfriend. Days before, on the 30th, so a day before, there's a text message exchange between Kat and Chandler, where Kat asks, we're not going to the cabin, right? And he says no. You're allowed to use your common sense. When you have conversations with significant others and you're texting, you're not going to get the full story because sometimes you do it in person. What we know from him and his girlfriend is that they chatted on Snapchat. They chatted everywhere they could. So you're not going to get the full story from text messages. But what you do know is that at some point, talks about going to this cabin as a family were happening. So this notion that the idea of going to the cabin was last minute because he needed to cover up these homicides that he was going to do is not true. Now, again with the lies. Certain lies mattered. Certain lies did not. What I want to clear up, and Attorney Raymond did a great job when she mentioned that we've seen this case multiple times. We've dealt with this case. We've talked to each other about this case. So sometimes we get things wrong. I'm going to clear up something that they got wrong. The evidence does not show that Bart and Krista knew about this SpaceX job. You heard from Kat's mother, Dulce, that she knew about it. You heard about Cress knew about it. Kat talked about it. Maybe another friend or roommate talked about it, but you never heard anyone testify that Bart and Krista knew about the SpaceX job. You heard from Bart's brother, Brett. I do not believe he mentioned it at all. So that's not a lie on this house of cards that was crashing down. That Bart and
That's
Krista
one
knew
lie.
about. You also didn't hear that they knew about the scuba team, dive team, whatever you want to call it, lie with the City of Madison Police Department. You heard it from his girlfriends, ex's girlfriend and Kat. You heard it from his friends, but you didn't hear it from people
Nobody lied
that
to
knew
his
Bart and Krista and said that they mentioned
parents
it.
for a really long time about being in school.
And even then, all of these
And
lies,
he's a
all of these
spoiled
lies,
ass
what
little
does it matter?
brat. And I guarantee you, it doesn't
So I
even
wanna talk about the
matter
two lies that
who
they
else
really
burnt
focused
up
on.
the parents.
Boy, did they do a
Who
great
else
job
burnt them
talking
up?
about these lies and making it seem like it really
Who
was a
else
big deal.
did it?
Let's talk about MATC. First of all, yesterday, I think we heard from an official person from MATC that said, no record that he attended school during this time. Detective Shunk showed us transcripts. You saw all his grades. He did attend at some point. That was really all you needed. You did not need to have the email conversations. You did not need to have the text conversations. You didn't need any of that, but they provided it to you, even though it's not an element or a charge that they have to prove. During their opening and throughout the case, they made a big deal about this email. It was an email between Bart and Krista. First of all, the email happened October 10th, 2020. The jig was up a long time ago. It didn't all of a sudden crash and burn on the 1st of July, 2021. And Bart knew. He was onto it. He says he sounds just like Chaz on the phone. Use your common sense. These email exchanges are from people with a .gmail.com address. official school people using a .gmail.com address. Both Bart and Crystal are college
At
educated.
gmail.com.
You want to tell me that they
Dumbass.
honestly thought that this was legit?
Oh, God.
Or maybe they knew that their child was lying and they were just going to carry on the lie. Same with AmFam. And I use AmFam colloquially, but American Family Insurance. Again, there was a person that testified yesterday that Chandler never worked there, but he still had emails, he still had text messages, he still had this and that confirming that he lied, even though one person could have done that. And again, it's not an element that they needed to prove. It's not a charge that they needed to prove. They just wanted you to know that he's a liar.
Okay, then put up a fucking
And what does
defense
it
for
matter?
an alternate.
Here's what you need to ask yourself. What does it matter? Because according to them, that's motive. That's the reason why he did what he did. This house of cards built of lies was crashing down and he had nothing. He couldn't do anything, but he had to murder these people. Why? Why? You don't know why. You were never told that they were going to kick him out of the house. You were never told that they were going to disown him. You were never told anything about why it matters. If this is going to be motive, if this is the reason you're intentionally killing someone, it better matter. There better be consequences.
They don't have to prove motive.
Kids
Judge said you don't have to prove motive.
And you just don't know how this was going to affect Chandler. He's complaining to his girlfriend the morning of about everything being fucked up and crashing down. You do that. That's what significant others are for. You honestly think that he's complaining about things crashing down and his mind is going straight to, well, now I'm just going to murder them. There was another motive that was mentioned very briefly, but it was mentioned, so I'll talk about it. When Mitchell testified, the very last question was about a life insurance policy. And I believe he said that the payout may have been about $1 million. And he acted confused. He didn't really know about it. It could very well be that the only reason he knows that number, that value, is because of things that are happening now. I don't doubt that kids know about parents having life insurance policies. I don't doubt that.
I don't know.
But ask yourself this, does everyone know how much the policy is worth? Probably not. Do you think you're going to get $1 million from your parents? Probably not. And there was no evidence that was provided to show that Chandler knew that there was a policy in place and he knew the value, knew enough of that value to do something very drastic to get that money. There was no evidence that he needed money. Yes, he did have a job, but nothing came out that he needed money.
I don't like you.
And I'm spending time talking about a motive because, as the judge said, they don't need to prove a motive. Motive does not mean intent, and I need you to understand that. Motive does not mean intent.
Then why the fuck are you harping on it? You harpy.
The other important part that I want to focus on is this timeline. If you go back to the opening, the state said,
oh my
from 3
God.
p.m. to 5 p.m. on the 1st, the killings occurred. Again, it's not
So
evidence,
much time left.
but it is a roadmap, and it is important. Because that's how they're going to tailor their case throughout. Well, first of all, Krista didn't get home until after 5 o'clock, roughly around 5:12.
Oh my
God.
God.
Deal about this MATC meeting. MATC with Chaz, MATC. You don't know if that was in person. You don't know what it's about other than MATC. You don't know if it was just a conversation that they were going to have. You don't know if it's a follow-up. You don't know anything about it other than some kind of MATC chat was going to happen between Bart and Chandler. And that was going to happen at 3 o'clock. I don't know about you, but my meetings never run on time. The other important part with this timeline is what we heard yesterday from Bart's employer. We asked him about that spreadsheet that has these logins. I remember the logins were in Eastern time. So what we said, what we were able to get out is that roughly from about 4:13, there was a login. What do we know about that login? We know that it's required, a password is required. We also know that, like a lot of dads, people keep their passwords in a place where they can remember them. We also know that the logins, that there was a certain amount of logins that you were able to do before you were booted out. We also know that that person tried these passwords, couldn't get it. So there's some leaps that you have to make in order for this theory or this timeline to make sense. The first leap you have to make is that Chandler knew that password. There's no evidence that he knew that. The second theory that you have to make is that while he's allegedly murdering his parents, he had the wherewithal to go to this computer and put on YouTube or something to keep it going.
Chandler's
when there's no
not that
evidence
smart,
that that
first
even
of all.
happened. There was a lot of evidence about cell phone data that were extracted, computer data, all of that, but nothing about Bart's laptop showing that there was YouTube or anything to keep that computer
Just been
active,
running a
because it had to be
program.
active. It would shut down or it would log off after 20 minutes of inactivity. The other piece of evidence with this timeline is that you had that neighbor that during their closing, the state said that the neighbor smelled something around 8 to 9 p.m. No, they testified that it was around 7 o'clock that they started smelling something. What we do know is that roughly around 8, around 8:30-ish, maybe a little earlier, look at your notes, Chandler went to Quick Trip to buy some ice. So again, another leap that you're supposed to make is that while he's allegedly murdering his parents, he decides, I'm going to start this fire. I'm going to put some things in that fire, but wait, I have to go to Quick Trip. Use your common sense. That makes sense to absolutely no one.
You know what? I don't like when they say use your
They don't get
common
the benefit
sense.
of the doubt that I get.
It sounds very condescending.
So they can't say, well, we might have been wrong. Get that. What you have is a medical examiner, 2 medical examiners that could not say the time of death. So really, truly, do you know what time these alleged homicides happened?
No, but your client does.
You know that they happened that day.
Fucking
based
ask
on other
him.
circumstantial evidence that you can put together, but you don't know the exact time. Let's talk about what else you do not know. You do not know what gun was used. They want to make a big deal about this gun. Let's talk about it. You heard from a medical examiner that there was at least 2 to 3 shots of a period. That medical examiner was not able to tell you what kind of gun. Wasn't even able to tell you if it was a high-powered rifle. Just a gun. She also wasn't able to tell you which wound occurred first. So this contact wound, that could have been the last one.
She
That could have been
only
the
had a torso.
This gun was not even located until October. These homicides occurred in July. Chandler apparently hid everything. He hid it so well that they didn't find it until October when the owner of that farm was cleaning out. If anything, Dane County deputies did a thorough investigation. They spent at least 3 hours in that barn. You want to tell me they couldn't find a gun, but they were able to find a part? What you know from the gun is that there's a bullet casing and a bullet fragment in this basement that matched to this gun. You do not know when that casing was there. You don't even know if that bullet fragment and that casing happened at the same time.
Yes. They
You don't
planted
know
it.
that this is a gun that was used on Bart. You don't know that.
Call him Brett. Fucking twat. Waffle.
So whenever you don't know about something, you have to ask yourself, have they met their burden? Is this proof beyond a reasonable doubt? Because you do have examples of what reasonable doubt is.
It's proof
Those maps
without
that
a
we saw
reasonable
yesterday
doubt
tracking Chandler's every single move,
because I don't like you.
matching up with where the bodies were found and at the time that they were found, that's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. A bloody
End of
tarp
story.
and some tools, that's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. But that doesn't mean that a homicide occurred. It means that something awful happened. And no one's disputing that. No one is saying that nothing happened to Bart and Krista. Something awful happened to these 2 people. And the very least you can say is that Chandler reacted. But you do not know what happened. And I know some of you have already made up your mind. I see it, and that's fine. Maybe you do think he murdered his parents. The question I have for you is, did the state meet their burden when it comes to first-degree intentional homicide? There are a lot of different homicides. First, second, reckless. They chose first-degree intentional homicide because they believed that they could prove that. I'm asking you that question. What have you been given that proves intent? Some searches after the fact? During closing, they said that the last time that there was any kind of search happened on the 8th. And they believed that he was just deleting his searches every day and he wasn't able to delete his searches on the 8th because he was arrested. Their searches on the 7th. And hey, guess what? There are times when I do not Google something. There are times when you all don't Google something.
I Google something every day.
So he was smart enough to delete his Google history, but he's not smart enough to delete anything else.
He's a boy.
He's smart enough to do a very good job about cleaning and concealing these homicides. But man, was he just really bad when it came to everything else.
He's
You
not
cannot
that
have
good at
it
it.
both ways.
You
You
dumbass.
can't have someone that is so cold and calculated
It happened on the 1st. He was
everything
arrested on the 8th.
and then say to themselves,
He's not that
I'm gonna be
fucking
reckless.
good.
You just can't have that with everything else that happened after these homicides. It's kind of laughable when you think about it. And you just don't have that with these homicides. Why? Why don't you have that? There was no evidence. There was no testimony at any point saying that Chandler had planned this out. And they would have brought it to you if they had it.
Don't have to have premeditation.
There's no evidence at all that Chandler is a violent person. And I'm not saying that you need to be a violent person to commit homicides. You know that. And intent is something that means something. And there's just no evidence that's providing you with that level
Bullshit.
of proof beyond a reasonable doubt that you need for this first-degree intentional homicide. Do you know how Bart was killed? Exactly how he was killed.
Gunshots.
Do you know how Krista was killed?
No.
Do you know if
that's
it
all
was
we
an
have
awful
are
accident?
links.
Do you know if it was intentional? Do you know if there was someone else involved? You don't. And that's a problem.
First of
Now,
all,
for better or for worse,
your
this
client
case has gotten a lot of media attention. And
was
unfortunately,
the
I have to
only
mention,
one
you were
else in
asked
the
every
house
day whether or not
that
you saw something on the news.
would
or you saw
know.
something on the news.
and
You
he
were
didn't
asked that for
say
a reason.
anything else.
You guys have a really bad job coming up. It's difficult. You do not want your job. You have to go back and look at everything and make sure that everything that you're discussing in that room actually came from evidence that you heard from that stand and not from the Google searches that you may or may not have done. I'm hoping you didn't, but I'm going to be realistic. Or the comment section on YouTube. And you're going to have to hold that person accountable, and you're going to have to hold that person accountable because that's your duty. You have another very
Don't do
serious duty
that.
that's
Don't
very hard for each
insinuate
and every
that
one of you to do.
the jury did not
You're going to have to take your emotions
hold their oath.
out of the equation. There was another promise that was said during the state's open. Promised you that they were not going to try to tug at your heartstrings and show you pictures that they didn't need to show you. When Mitchell testified, do you think he needed a giant blow-up picture of his parents next to him to be reminded what his parents looked like? When Brett testified, do you think it was for their case to ask him the last conversation he had with his brother on his birthday, the birthday being July 1st? No, they didn't do that because they needed it for the case. They did it because they want you to think of your emotions. They want you to feel things, because when you feel things, it's going to be harder for you to separate feelings from facts.
That's the point.
And you're going to have to do that because
You
you
can
may
do
feel
that.
bad. No one here feels great about what happened. And after you make your decision, no one's going to walk out of this courtroom feeling at ease, at peace, happy. But you're going to have to do that. And people are not going to like it, regardless of what the decision is. You're going to have to hold
I
people
think they'll be
accountable.
okay with it. I don't think this jury will lose any sleep over
I don't
putting
get to
this
come back.
guy in jail.
When I'm done, the state's going to come up and they're going to do their rebuttal. And they're going to say everything that I said is flawed some way, somehow, or that you shouldn't pay attention to it. And that's fine. That's their job. They have the burden. They have the last say. But when they're talking during their rebuttal, I want you to think of this. What if I told you that at any minute, someone's going to walk into that door, someone from the Dane County Deputy's Department is going to walk in and say, I found it. I found the video we were looking for. I know exactly what happened in that house on the 1st. It doesn't exist. But what if it did? Are you going to be paying attention to, I'm going to assume it's Mr. Brown, or are you going to be paying attention to what Mr. Brown has to say during his rebuttal, or are you going to be looking at that door hoping that someone walks in? And if
You're
you're going
an
to look at that
idiot.
door hoping that someone comes in, you have reasons to doubt.
No,
There are
because if
plenty
there were
of
reasons to
that a
doubt,
first-degree intentional homicide occurred.
you would have brought
There are plenty of
them.
reasons to doubt. You may not like that. It may feel like a cop-out. It may feel like I'm just
If there were reasons to doubt, you would have put up a defense.
Coming up here and talking to you. I'm not. I'm doing
But
my
you
job.
couldn't
I'm
even
making sure
put
that
up
they
a
do their job. And I'm
defense.
asking you to do your very difficult job of evaluating everything. And from day one, the issue has been the homicides. I want you to spend time on the homicides. Ask yourself the questions that you need to ask. I guarantee you that the 12 of you that are going to go back and deliberate are all going to have 12 different theories on what happened. And that's
See,
the
I
problem.
wonder if they know he did it, and that's why they can't
I'm asking you to find
ethically
him
put
not
up a
guilty
defense.
of first-degree homicide. Thank you.
Oh my God, excuse me.
Thank you. Please be. Just, Randy determined that it'd be easier to collect
Oh my
the
God.
notebooks at this point, and then once we know who the alternates are, he'll have to spend a moment. Thank you, Attorney Vera. As counsel indicated, the state carrying the burden of proof has the opportunity for a rebuttal. In other words, the last word, and I believe Attorney Brown will provide that to you at this time.
That was ridiculous.
Thank you.
I don't have your mask on, lady.
There's a lot of talk in the defense closing and opening about things I learned in law school, or going to law school. And I think in the opening, I heard at one point, being a jury is different than being a person. I think that's true, but I'm done with law school and I do this for a living. I operate in a world of common sense and not fanciful thoughts of just this guy finding his dead parents and deciding no big deal, let's just cut them apart and hide them around the state. But who knows how they died? I live in that world. That's the world you should live into. Because being a juror is no different than being a person, unlike maybe what you were told earlier. You're told by the judge, although they figured out a way to say it in about 2 paragraphs, you use your common sense and experience in the roles of everyday life, or something along those lines. A bunch of lawyers got together and thought about it for 2 weeks and figured out a way to say, use your common sense.
Okay, I gotta slow him down. He talks
This
real
just stood up here and
fast.
said, what if this was an awful accident? Bart Halderson was shot in the back twice. You do not fall down and shoot yourself in the back twice.
You don't. That's
Halderson and Carson had their heads chopped off, had their arms and legs removed. That was an awful accident. Think of for a second. You heard about the bones. You saw those marks on the bones, those attempts. Some of them 3, some of them 10, some of them 5. False starts is what the anthropologists call them. That is someone on their hands and knees. Chandler, apparently, which was just saying, I guess we're admitting to that now. They lied and chopped him up and hit him around the state. On his hands and knees, some of them from the front to back, meaning probably could see the face of his mom and his dad as that saw moved back and forth, back and forth. And you just saw the bones, but what's before the bones? The skin, the blood, the muscle, the fat, the smell that they had to produce, the blood of his own parents. An awful accident.
I wonder if he's like,
we heard,
like,
I go days without
it.
Googling things.
Like thinking about it.
Maybe you do. But I bet you don't Google dismembered body found in Wisconsin when you're crying on the local news about your missing parents. I bet you don't Google woman's dismembered body found. I bet you don't do legal research about some other guy who chopped up his family members and threw them in a river. Bet you don't do that.
I mean, my Google history is a little sketch. I watch a lot of weird
Ms.
shit.
Vera talked a lot about the lies. Chandler is a liar, and it seems like we all agree on that now. Lots of people lie. I can agree with Ms. Vera on that. The question in this case isn't who would do this? And maybe that's something that's gone through your mind here. Who would do this? Who would go through all this? Who would make up all these lies? Who would take it this far? All these fake people, the burner phone, the nonsense, the calls to his dad, the emails back and forth, the friends and family, the move to Florida. Who would do this? And you're going to leave this room. 6 of you are going to go home. 12 of you are going to go into a room and talk to each other. And you're never going to have an answer to that question. Because who would do this in the common sense meaning of it? Nobody does something like this. But that's not the role of a jury. You're answering a different question, which is who did this, not who would do this. Because for the life of you, I bet before you got that notice in the mail a couple months ago saying you had to come here, you would say nobody. You would have said nobody. Nobody would shoot their dad in the back twice, or kill their mom, lay him on the ground in front of their family fireplace, take scissors, and pruning shears, take a hacksaw, take a keyhole saw, and saw off their heads, arms, legs, burn them in the fireplace. Over 100 fragments of human bone found in that fireplace. You'd say no one would do this. But you got your jury summons, and you ended up here, and you found out that someone did do it. Chandler Halderson did it. So those lies are important. Because you at some level have to grasp how this man got to that point. As I said in the opening statement, the murders were just a small piece of the puzzle. None of the things that happened before, none of the things that happened after make any sense. You gotta have the murders to understand why he did that bizarre story for 7 days of his parents going missing with the unknown couple. And you can understand the murders if you understand what happened before with his bizarre actions of building up this life that wasn't real. Why were those lies important? They were important because that's all he had. We're here because of the deaths of Bart and Krista Halderson, and they are dead.
That's true.
There's no doubt about that. You have most decidedly concluded that at this point. You have seen their bodies. But on some level, whoever Chandler Halderson was died years ago as well. And what was left was this shell of a person who made this nonsense up, who built himself up to be a tech employee, rescue scuba diving guy, who's going to college. It was all he had. It was all he had. And that started to unravel. Maybe his parents suspected it. But you listened to Bart Halderson on that call just about a day before he was killed. That sound like someone to you who knew his son had been lying to him? Those text messages. I spoke to Omar Job. I'm ready whenever you are. He didn't know what was going on until that moment. So when Bart Halderson finds out that this is a lie, to Chandler, whoever Chandler Halderson is, the whole world crumbles. Because if you weren't going to school, they sure weren't going to hire you at American Family Insurance. That couldn't have been real. There's no way you got a job at SpaceX. What else are you lying about? Where are you going all the time when you say you're training for this scuba diving team? Everything about him falls apart. He doesn't have any money. Remember when he texted his girlfriend he was going to the police? Hey, can I have $5 for a sandwich? He can't just leave. He can't move out. He can't get in the car and head west. He probably couldn't make it out of the state with the amount of money he had because he never had a job. He had two options. Own up to his lies, stand up, and finally tell the truth for once. Or like a coward, shoot your father in the back. And that's exactly what happened. What happened? It says, wow, we just got a showcase. Yeah, we got a bullet fragment. Just happens to have Bart Halderson's DNA on it. When you look at it, just happens to have blood all over it. And then text my mom. Hey, pick up soda for me. Dad's phone's dead. She gets home. Whose blood spatters on the safe right there by the bullet fragment? Those little red dots, human blood. It's Crystal Halderson. We don't know what happened. We know exactly what happened. Murders are not captured on video. That's not how this happens. That's not how this works. Sure, in the grand scheme of things, there are some people who are stupid enough to walk up to a gas station, stand in front of the security camera, and shoot somebody. That's not real life. That's not cops. Chandler Halderson did this in the basement of his house. The blood is everywhere. The bullet's there. You heard from Mr. Wellerberry, who testified. He only found one, and the one he found was kind of rolled behind under that bench. He tried to clean up. Peroxide everywhere. He's having people bring him peroxide. Blood all over that fireplace stoop. Bone fragments in the ash trap. You know exactly what happened. You don't need a video. The lies are important because it's all Chandler Halderson had. And when they were exposed, he started coming up with his plan. And yeah, after the Omar Job text comes in on the 29th, he's having a conversation with his girlfriend. You heard? That's fair. Actually, right? That's fair. The day before, hey, are we going to the cabin? What's going on? They're talking about the cabin. He's starting to dabble with the idea of what he's doing. Then I think it was at 1:04 p.m. It's about an hour and a half, 2 hours before he did it. He says they're going to the cabin this weekend. He made his final decision. Because at that moment, Chandler Halderson knew there was no way out. He couldn't get in the car and drive away. He couldn't make up another lie. He couldn't make up another email. He couldn't buy another burner phone. It was done. Everyone was going to see him for what he was. Just some liar.
Because his dad talked to him, found out there was no Alyssa, there was no David or Aaron.
The ultimate act of betrayal against your parents. Perhaps against
there was nobody. He hadn't been in school. He didn't earn a degree
cuts on your knee when
or a certificate.
Comforted you when you were crying. The ultimate act of betrayal. He shot his parents. And then he cut them up. Jesus. Hid them. But the lies didn't even stop there. There was a new lie. No, that's the cabin. Now he's on the news. Now he's giving interviews. Given 2-3 more days, don't think for a second there wouldn't have been 2-3 more fake emails. Text messages from my mom. A whole new world. A whole new reality for Chandler that he got to live in. His checklist was right there. Finally, he was going to get a job. Obviously, mom and dad couldn't support him anymore. Maybe he was going to get some life insurance. Maybe he knew, maybe he didn't. But he certainly got to continue on his fake life. He got to keep his girlfriend. People continued to respect him. His friends probably continued to think that he was successful, important. The lies were rinsed and repeated, rinsed and repeated. And I promise I'm about done, and I'm the last person who talks. The judge is going to talk a little bit more. What he's going to say next is hard to hear, in that he has to read off the verdict forms you're going to take back to the jury room with you. Verdict forms are the physical documents for each charge. There's a bunch of charges here. For each one, there's one that says guilty and not guilty, guilty and not guilty, guilty and not guilty. He actually read them all. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but he has to do it. But what Ms. Vera is asking you to do is to lie. It is the last lie of Chandler Halderson. His lawyers stood up here and told you to lie for him. Not to do what you swore to do, which is to render a just and true verdict based on the evidence, to reconcile the evidence. If you can find any reasonable hypothesis consistent with the defendant's innocence, a reasonable hypothesis, that reasonable hypothesis that was just offered to you is that it was an accident.
She just told her to object.
That's how they died.
And she told her
And then Chandler
no.
made what his attorney believes to be the reasonable decision to chop apart those bodies and hide them around the state.
She was like, nah.
What you're being asked to do is to lie one last time. It is the experience that everyone in Chandler Halderson's life has had to deal with, and now it's yours. His girlfriend dealt with it. Sure, Bart and Krista dealt with it. Finding out maybe on the last day of their lives. Mitchell is dealing with it. Brett is dealing with it. Their family friends. The Hogendorfs. Their kids, Haley and Hannah. They've had to deal with it. Mary Sesto had to deal with it. Kevin Linsmeyer, the neighbor, had to deal with it. Then to the police. Deputy Seeley, Deputy Nelson, Deputy Shum, Deputy Sims, Deputy Hendrickson, Deputy Collins LaFleur. Everyone who has interacted with this man for years
I get it.
has had no other experience other than being lied to. And now it's you that's going to be lied to by his attorneys. Asking
Okay,
you.
I'm going to object now.
Thanks for your patience, folks. I want to clarify that, of course, within the instructions, as far as closing argument not being evidence, closing argument being opinions expressed by counsel for both the state and the defense to you about their view of the evidence and so forth. My understanding is the state was not meaning to suggest that counsel for the defense had lied or in any way was urging you to do anything other than uphold your oath and to follow the law as instructed in your deliberations. You can continue.
Thank you. Those verdict forms you're going to fill out. Every single one of them
I mean, he did say
represents something.
they lied.
And what we're asking you to do is to dig through that evidence, dig through your notes, dig through.
But the
your
only time she fucking talked was during closing,
wasn't an
so it's not
What happened here
evidence.
wasn't a mistake. What happened here wasn't
So
innocence,
only
lies,
her opinions is lies.
coincidences. Mr. Halderson's statement to the police that my mom has nosebleeds and my dad, he just scratches his psoriasis. It doesn't explain his blood on a bullet fragment.
Yeah,
It doesn't explain
I
all
love
of their
that.
blood on the fireplace. It doesn't explain the Halderson's teeth in the ash trap. It doesn't explain their skull in the ash trap and
I
placed on
mean,
top
it
of the
didn't
fireplace.
say whose teeth were.
What I'm asking you to do is to look for the truth
But
and not to negotiate.
who else's teeth will they
Not to the idea
be?
that, well, there's one piece of paper there where he signed the document and says he lied to the cops, and maybe that's good enough. These people were killed. This is a first-degree intentional homicide.
Please share with the class.
This is a first-degree intentional homicide. You cannot shoot someone in the back. You cannot chop them up. You cannot scatter their remains and come to any other conclusion.
Oh, darn.
And there is only one person who did those things here.
I thought
And
you
that is Chandler
could.
Halderson. And we're asking you to find him guilty. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, we don't get to listen to jury instructions, but we get to go straight into the verdict. What do y'all think? I mean, come on. We already know. But, excuse me. Lord Jesus. We already know what the verdict is. We already know what the verdict is. Where's it at? How the hell did it get way down here? Where is it? Oh, for Pete's sake. The verdict is in. The verdict is in. Hold on. Stop it. Closed captioning. We're going to play at a normal speed. I don't know why, but we will. And it says it's only 9 minutes long, but I don't know that it is a full 9 minutes. But rumor is jury was only out for 2 hours. It was only out for 2 hours. Yeah, that's never good. Like, I think a quick return is it's a bad sign, yo. I mean, bad sign for the defendant, usually. So, I mean, yes. But okay. The verdicts. Stand here and stare. Oh, we got quietness. It's going to be, what, a whole 2 minutes again? Yep. Oh no! Judge is in. Where's the sound? Where's the sound, Judge? Oh, there we go.
Record. And the
Record.
appearances are as they were previously. Is there anything from the state before?
See, it was the same day.
No.
Got the same
Anything from the
tie,
defense?
everything.
Randy, if you would.
Same day. 2 hours, y'all. Judge was not prepared. Lady, put your fucking phone away. Rude ass bitch. God. Hello? Is anybody there? He's sitting up on that thing all by himself, and he's got to wear that mask. Seems unfair. Oh, fix your bow tie, Mr. Judge. Mr. Judge, man.
Please be seated. Juror number 6, by all indications, you would be the foreperson. Is that correct? Sir, did the jury reach verdicts on all counts in this matter? Could you please give Randy the folder? The verdict form on count 1, as signed by the presiding juror and dated today, reads, "We, the jury, find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson guilty of first-degree intentional homicide as to Bart A. Halderson, as charged in count 1 of the amended information. As to the verdict form for count 2, as signed and dated, we, the jury, find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson guilty of providing false information about a missing person as to Bart A. Halderson, as charged in count 2 of the amended information. Verdict form for count 3, as signed and dated, reads, we, the jury, find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson guilty of mutilating a corpse as to Bart A. Halderson, as charged in count 3 of the amended information. Verdict form for count 4, as signed and dated, reads, we, the jury, find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson guilty of hiding a corpse as to Bart A. Halderson, as charged in count 4 of the amended information. The verdict form for count 5, as signed and dated, reads, we, the jury, find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson guilty of first-degree intentional homicide as to Krista R. Halderson, as charged in count 5 of the amended information. The verdict form for count 6, as signed and dated by the foreperson, reads, we, the jury, find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson guilty of providing false information about a missing person as to Krista R. Halderson, as charged in count 6 of the
She's
amended
just rude.
information. The verdict form as to count
Like,
7,
I've never seen an
as signed
attorney
and
just
dated,
on their
reads, we,
phone
the
during
jury,
a verdict.
find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson
Like, who
guilty
are
of
you?
mutilating a corpse as to Krista R. Halderson, as charged in count 7 of the amended information. And finally, the
Like,
verdict form
who
for count
are you?
8, as signed and dated, reads, we, the jury, find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson guilty of hiding a corpse as to Krista R. Halderson, as charged in count 8 of the amended
Why are you not
information.
standing?
I will note for the record that the jury also returned the 8 verdict forms that read not guilty, and that those do not bear any signature or date, as well as returning the jury instructions. Let me inquire of you, and I'll use initials. Ms. B, are the verdicts which I read the verdicts with which you agreed? Yes. Mr. Daringer, are those the verdicts with which you agreed? Yes. Mr. H, are those the verdicts with which you agreed? Yes, they are. Mr. M, are those the verdicts with which you agreed? I do not need to ask the foreperson, as his signature appeared on the verdicts. Ms. C, are those the, Mr. C, are those the verdicts with which you agreed? Ms. W, are those the verdicts with which you agreed? Mr. M, are those the verdicts with which you agreed? Yes, sir. Mr. H, are those the verdicts with which you agreed? Yes. Mr. A, are those the verdicts with which you agreed? Yes. Mr. J, are those the verdicts with which you agreed?
Mr. J.
And Mr. B, are those the verdicts with which you agreed? Ladies and gentlemen, at this point in time, you have finished your service here as the jury in this case. I have to tell you that words are difficult to come with to express the gratitude that I feel, and that I believe those people within the criminal justice system which we serve feel regarding the
State
time,
feels
and
thankful.
concentration, and the
Chandler,
sacrifice.
however, would also like to unalive you like he did his parents. Well, hey, we are done. That is all, folks, on that one. He's guilty, he's guilty. Who thought he wasn't? Because I sure did. I thought he was. I thought he was guilty the whole time. The whole time. Now, I wish there was more on the girlfriend. I wish there was more. The defense would have had more bearing if they would have put up some sort of defense, but they didn't put up any defense. They didn't put up anything. Now, I understand the state has the burden of proof, and I understand that they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he did the things that they say he did. But also at the same time, if you don't give me If you give me something to doubt, okay, that's fine. But they didn't really give me anything to doubt. I mean, yeah, I don't know how the mom was killed. I mean, there are alternative ways as far as, if you could have proved, maybe it was like a self-defense thing and then he freaked out. And if you could have went that route and then tried to, prove that theory, maybe went that route. Perhaps I could have rolled with you on that one. But you didn't do anything. So I don't know. You just sat there. You didn't say anything. So, no. He's guilty. That's it. He's done. Now, intentional homicide in Wisconsin, as we know, or as I know, as we know, whoever watched it, whoever didn't watch it, I don't know. Intentional homicide in Wisconsin carries a minimum life sentence without parole. So there's that. And he's got 2. So there you go. I don't know if he's been sentenced yet, but that's neither here nor there. They don't have the death penalty. So that is off the table. I don't know if they had any type of sentencing hearing. I'm sure they did, but it's not on there. Oh, goodness, sorry. So that's it. That's all I got. It's been fun. It's been real. Catch you on the flip side. Oh, like, comment, subscribe, all of the thingies right here. Do them. Okay? Peace. Wait, gosh dang it. One day I will have my life together. One day. Okay, bye.